What's your favorite New Testament scripture? Many people would say the Sermon on the Mount. I guess that makes sense. It starts off very comforting and happy. Blessed are these people, blessed are those people. But very few realize that the entirety of the Sermon on the Mount is a warning to believers, a warning from Yeshua, Jesus, to obey the commandments of the Old Testament, or they would not enter the kingdom of heaven. Yes, really. The Sermon on the Mount is that harsh, and we're going to show you why that's true, because we're all about the truth, especially at the end of the sixth day after the sun is set on Shabbat Night Live.
Michael, it's going to be a great show tonight.
It will be.
Stand by, studio, 30 seconds.
Thank you. One minute's air, Michael.
Oh, thanks.
All right, this is it.
Thanks, Ellie.
Well, Shabbat Shalom to our fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rue, where we show you that all that glitters is not gold, well, especially when it comes to reading the scriptures. Sometimes what we think is just an encouraging word is actually a dire warning. Speaking of warnings, tonight may be the one and only chance you ever get to see this amazing footage of the real site of Noah's Ark. Tonight is episode 4 of the 4-part series, AD, Archaeology Discovered with Kévin Fisher. But first, please welcome my co-host for this evening. She is the Director of Ministry Development for A Rude Awakening International, Annie Reed.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. So Michael is on assignment.
Yes, and he's going to share with us where he's been in a few weeks. So.
Okay.
But in the meantime, you're spending some time with Kévin Fisher.
Yes.
And you guys are really revealing some exceptional footage to us.
There is some really
Pictures
interesting stuff there. Yeah, we've talked about Sodom and Gomorrah. We've talked about the Red Sea crossing. Last week was the Ark of the Covenant. And now another Ark, Noah's Ark.
Which is not at the location that you assume it to be.
Right. Yeah, this was really fascinating stuff. And he has some really interesting pictures. And it's just a really amazing thing to see. So I really encourage you to watch it because it's going to be a lot of fun. Grab your friends and family because everybody loves a story about Noah's Ark. And this is a true story.
That's right. And it's exciting to me that we still have so much evidence that is uncovered on a yearly basis in Noah's Ark. And all of these locations, really.
Yes.
There's still new discoveries on a regular basis each and every single year. So.
Yeah, and every time you see a piece of this discovery, you can't deny it. I mean, people can scoff all they want, but when you've got the evidence in your hand, there's something to be said for that.
Well, and I know people question why so many, why don't we have universities excavating these locations or scientists on the digs. These locations are oftentimes in countries that are not very friendly towards the U.S.
Yep.
And so they have to get special permits. I know that when they do the Noah's Ark digs, whenever they do archaeological digs there in Turkey, they actually have to get permission not only from the Turkish government, but from their military as well.
Oh, really?
To go there.
Did not realize that.
And then we all know that Sodom and Gomorrah, real Mount Sinai is in Saudi Arabia.
That's even harder.
And they are not going to allow you to get anywhere near that
Yeah.
location if they have anything to say about it.
Yeah,
so.
no tourist visas at all, from my understanding with Kévin. Yeah.
No, so they get there by the grace of God, but it's slowly.
Indeed.
Hopefully one day it'll open up to everybody.
Yeah, and
so.
we need to really pray for these folks who are sticking their necks out in uncomfortable places around the world who bring us the truth of God's words. After the Messiah's ascension, his followers were told to wait for the Comforter, who would empower them with his Spirit. Little did they realize that just 10 days later at Pentecost, they would not only receive that gift, but witness a fire from heaven on the anniversary date that the Almighty delivered his commandments in the same way on Mount Sinai. The rushing wind, the pillar of fire, and the miraculous correlations between the Spirit and the Torah. Michael Root explains it all in this month's exclusive teaching,
Shavuot, the promise received.
And this pillar of fire was that awesome pillar of fire that we followed out of Egypt that led us by night and the cloud by day.
For Moses.
Get the truth of what really happened in Jerusalem on that day. We'll send you this amazing teaching for a love gift donation of just $50. For more than 20 years, Ron Wyatt spent his life and his life savings on researching and finding the real Mount Sinai, Sodom and Gomorrah, Noah's Ark, and the Ark of the Covenant. Discover the amazing truth of Ron Wyatt's discoveries in a special series on Shabbat Night Live, AD, Archaeology Discovered. Special guest Kévin Fisher walks you through every discovery in detail, including his personal verification that the sites Ron Wyatt found are real.
You can see the four major discoveries: the Noah's Ark, Red Sea crossing, Mount Sinai, Sodom and Gomorrah. Those are visible things.
Right now, you can pre-order this fascinating series on DVD and Blu-ray. You'll get all 4 episodes now playing on Shabbat Night Live, plus Revealing God's Treasure, featuring bonus presentations by the late Ron Wyatt. More than 7 total hours of amazing discoveries. Pre-order AD, the Archaeology Discovery Collection, and get 20% off the retail price. Order now, online or by phone. The Chronological Gospels with Michael Rood takes you on an unprecedented journey through the 70 weeks of the Messiah's ministry. Discover the greatest story never told, from the day he was baptized to the day he baptized the disciples with tongues of fire. Learn behind-the-scenes truth of what the Messiah did, when he did it, why it matters, and how knowing the difference can change your life. Get the Chronological Gospels on Blu-ray or DVD now. Order online or by phone.
And welcome to our 4th and final episode with Kévin Fisher from Ark Discovery International, found at arkdiscovery.com. And today we're talking about something we haven't talked much about on Shabbat Night Live, so we're very glad you're here. We are talking about the Ark, which is Noah's Ark. We usually talk about Ark of the Covenant. We talked about that on the last episode. Now we're going to get into Noah's Ark. So tell us all about Noah's Ark, where it was found, all the fascinating details around it.
Yes, this is the site, again, found by Ron Wyatt. In 1977, he went out there and God helped him locate it. He prayed and God, did help him find it. It had been shown in Life magazine previously, but in 1960, but it was kind of cast aside and not enough attention given to it. But we're going to head out there and take a look at the real site.
All right. Now this is the first thing I found fascinating, that we always assume it's on Mount Ararat, but it's not really Mount Ararat, and I'll let you give the detail on that.
Yes. The Bible says the ark came to rest in the mountains of Ararat, mountains plural, and Ararat. Now the name Ararat is the name of an ancient country called Urartu. And so the ark was to come to rest in the mountains of this ancient country of Urartu. And that is where it was found. It was found within the borders of the ancient country, covering Turkey, Armenia, and edge of Iran. So it is in the correct location according to the Bible.
All right.
So with our slides here, our first slide, we're starting out in Istanbul. Usually if you're coming from America, you'll fly into Istanbul. And one of the nice sites to go to is at the Hagia Sophia Mosque. It was originally a Christian church, built in the 6th century, and for 1,000 years, if you can imagine, for 1,000 years, it was the largest Christian church until the Vatican was built. But it's great to go inside of that. And then the next day, you fly out to eastern Turkey, and here we see the famed Mount Ararat in the distance. There's no clouds. Usually it's enshrouded by clouds.
And there's no ark there either.
No. The ark's there, just a lark.
Oh.
But a lot of false stories. And as Ron Wyatt would say, that would muddy the water. When these false stories, one after another, over there on Mount Ararat. But that's one of the last places. Here's a close-up of the mountain peak there, very tall, 17,000 feet high, but it's a post-flood volcanic mountain. You see all these lava flows coming out from it. And so it's one of the last places you would want to look for Noah's Ark.
So now if people assume, they go on the assumption that, well, it's a tall mountain, there was water all over, it was the first peak that appeared, and therefore that's where it is.
Yes, but that's a wrong assumption. Also, it's hard for a boat to come to rest on a conical-shaped mountain. It's just, you cannot move over and become, lodged in it.
Not to mention the fact it was post-flood.
Yes, post-flood. It didn't exist right at the time of the flood.
And a volcano that would have obliterated anything with lava flows and et cetera.
So Genesis 8:4, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. The mountains plural, and we said Ararat is a name of an ancient country called Urartu. And in Encyclopedia Britannica, the name Ararat, as it appears in the Bible, is a Hebrew equivalent of Urartu, ancient country of Southwest Asia mentioned in Syrian sources from the 13th century BC. So again, Urartu, I stayed at the Urartu Hotel my first visit out there. So they're still using the name out there in eastern Turkey. So if you drive from that town, Dagobazit, is about a town of 50,000 people there near the Ark. But if you head about 10 miles away, you'll see a road sign, the only road through the area. There's a road sign that says Nuhan Gamishi, 5 kilometers, or Noah's Ark or Noah's Big Boat is up the road here. So this is a government erected road sign acknowledging Noah's Ark is up the road. And so here's another angle of the sign, and the mountain in the background there is where the ark is located. This is sedimentary Cretaceous water-laid rock. This is not, volcanic mountain that came up afterwards. This is rock from the time of the flood. And from that vantage point, using a zoom lens, I was able to capture on the left here, left center, you see the ark formation. That kind of flat area.
Oh, down below there, yes.
Yes.
Center left, okay.
And to the right, and near the center, you see the roof of the visitor center at Noah's Ark. In 1987, there's a visitor center was dedicated and built commemorating Noah's Ark National Park. So, the government has acknowledged this as the place for Noah's Ark. Now, in the 1st century, Flavius Josephus stated, its remains are shown there by the inhabitants to this day. So it was not hidden away in some glacier over on Mount Ararat. It was in an accessible location like it is today. It's about 6,300 feet up at the current location above sea level.
So there are even inhabitants there even in Josephus's time.
The locals there, there's a village right above the Ark here where they were probably hosting visitors, coming to Noah's Ark. That may have been known as the Noah's Ark Village or something, in ancient times. So here's another graphic of the Ark and a rainbow and the visitor center to the right behind the trees. But Ron's first visit out there in 1977, they had 3 days in the area. He had a 2-week vacation from his work to travel out there, 5.5 days traveling, and 5.5 days to get back. He had 3 days in the area, and what do you do if you don't? He didn't really know where it was located. The 1960 group couldn't tell him. All they could tell him was it was on a mountain range, and there was Mount Ararat in the distance. But that's still a needle in a haystack, and you've only got 3 days. So he and his sons prayed, and they hired a taxi. They prayed that God would show them a sign. And when they started driving down these roads, after a while the taxi stalled. It stopped. And they got excited. They said, hey, this may be a sign from God. And they put a pile of stones next to the road there.
Smart.
Yeah. And then the taxi started, and they got back in. So 3 times that day the taxi stopped. And they put a pile of stones there. The next day they went back to these piles of stones and walked directly out from them. And what they found was Noah's Ark, sea anchors that hung from the Ark, and the remains of an ancient structure connected to Noah, perhaps his house or something.
So they took this taxi, not knowing where they were going, and just said, drive us around, we're trying to find something.
That's right. So, but it worked. I mean,
It did.
God was in control. I mean, he's in control.
God was not the co-pilot that day. He was the pilot.
He was the pilot. So today this is the visitor center. When you come up to the visitor center, they have displays inside where you can see the various pieces of information or artifacts or evidence that's been uncovered over the years at the Ark site. No one has ever been issued a permit to excavate this. Now, that's not any of our fault. The government just has never approved an excavation permit. So far there's just been surface inspection done and a little bit of, well, there's a core drill done that we'll talk about later, but no formal excavation. And then there's a visitor center guest book where people are signing in from all different nations, and people are writing, exciting comments about.
So in Japan, we see Holland, Poland. People come from all over the world to this place.
Yeah, when you're down there, we spent days down there at the Ark site, and you'll see tourists coming in vans, tour groups, and one after another, tour group coming there and looking down upon the Ark. So people are coming there, on a regular basis from all over the world to see the Ark site. And when I went there the first time in 2000, I had a newspaper article from the Knoxville newspaper that had the image of the Ark and had the visitor center curator there, Hassan Ozer. He was in the photo, so I got a copy of that newspaper. I had it laminated, and I took it there to Hassan there in the visitor center and gave it to him. He was very appreciative of it. But when you pull up the visitor center, again, you see the boat-shaped formation in the background, and you see the Nuhun Gamishi sign, Noah's big boat or Noah's Ark, pointing right to it in this sign. And here is a view from the rear or from the stern, and you can see on the right some rib timbers, a little bit lighter color. Large boat shapes are built with ribs as a superstructure.
So do we know now, when you go up to those, as I assume you did, and are they, I mean, it looks like dirt from here. It just looks like maybe it's dirt.
Now, there has been some dirt that covered it. It was moved down to its current location in a mud and lava flow at some point. It was originally came to rest up higher on the mountain and was pulled down to this spot and was actually impaled on a rock outcropping that kept it from going further down the mountain. It would have been destroyed if it had been pulled further down. So there was some mud and lava on it originally, but God has been bringing it up out of the ground or dropping the sides around it, because when it was first found in 1960, the ground level around it was up to the edge of the boat. And
you could just see the shape on the surface.
Right, you could not see these nice rib timbers on the sides. So since then, God has been dropping the sides and has been revealing it more and more, so we can investigate it better by having the sides exposed and so forth. So God, has been watching over it. And this next photo, you see more of a close-up of those rib timbers on the sides. They are vertical rib timbers in a regular order or sequence, and they're vertical. And of course, you have a flow of water coming down the mountain, and these are perpendicular to the flow of water coming down the mountain. The water coming down the mountain is not creating these. These are vertical. So this is not just something that's been carved out by nature.
And again, an excavation has never been done, so we don't have any evidence that this is, or do we, that these are petrified wood on the sides there?
Petrified wood has been found inside of it. It's been tested and so forth, so we know this is a wooden structure. And then we'll get in a little bit later about the metal that's been found inside of it, which is very exciting. Now here is the right or starboard side, and we're looking up toward the bow or the front of the Ark in the distance. You can see the point or front bow of the Ark. And on the right side here, we see the starboard side where the rib timbers are sticking up above the ground here. And this is a similar shot, but now we're standing just inside the Ark. And again, in the distance, you can see the bow where some folks are standing on the bow, and they're looking down the length of the Ark. And here's a similar one where you can see the bow sticking up, and this rock intrusion right in front of us where it impaled the Ark and it kept it from sliding further down the mountain. Now here's another view from the stern, from the back. You can see the symmetrical shape. The center of it is rounded, and then the sides have fallen out. It's wider as stated in the Bible, but as we'll see shortly here, it's the exact length as stated in the Bible.
Now, what do you say to some folks who say, well, there are similar outcroppings like this around the world, and they show, see, here's other ones. What's the difference there?
Because this has man-made metal in it that we'll talk about.
That's the difference.
Yes, yes. This has the petrified wood. It's the exact length as stated in the Bible, and it has the man-made metal in it. So there are all these signs pointing to it, as being the real site. This is another image of the curved deck. In the center here, it's symmetrical with the sides splayed outwards. Here's another graphic of it showing the front, the rear, the rib timbers on the sides. It's the exact biblical length.
And the center is filled in just from years and years of things flowing around it.
Some of it is mud, and some of it are the remains, the actual structure. So it's a combination of things. And in the distance here, we can see the bow. Once again, it's a symmetrical point in the top of the photo here.
So we are inside the boat facing the front.
We're standing kind of in the center of the boat, looking up to the front. And the front was pointed for a reason. The ark needed to be pointed into the waves, to pierce the waves. And
so speaking of which, we have a model of it here on the desk.
Yes.
And some people might say, well, 6,000 years ago, they didn't have boats like this. Noah's Ark was just a big block, square. So what do we say to that?
Well, I think God helped in the design and probably told Noah, how to build it. It's in a 6-to-1 ratio like modern ocean liners today. It's the length is 6 times the width. So, very well designed. But what we have here in this model is, again, the shape of it. It's got the pointed front, the rounded rear. It has these, off the front of it, these anchor stones that we'll see shortly. These created weight and resistance on the front when the ship was in the heavy waters, and would allow the wind and the waves to push the rear into line with the oncoming waves. This would shift over, the rear would shift, and the front would be pointing into the waves that were coming in. And so the anchor stones were very important. We'll see that a little bit later, where there were these large stones, some of which are 10 feet in height, had holes drilled through them, and ropes through the holes, and then they were attached to the front of the ark. So we see the pointed bow. It's there for a reason, so that the front would pierce the oncoming waves. And in our next photo here, in the distance, you see a large round hole. This is where the 1960 group, they put some dynamite in there and blew out the side of the ark. That wasn't a very gentle excavation.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't exactly a core sample.
Yes,
no.
It was instant excavation, and they believe they didn't see anything, nicely petrified, and left after that. Here's a closer shot of the hole where they blew in the side of the ark. The ground level was up to that point back in 1960, and since then it's dropped quite a bit.
So have any other, well, I guess no excavations have been approved, so nothing else has been dug out of that hole.
Right, out of that hole, that's true, yes. But out of that hole, I was able to climb up in there and take a picture out of it, and you can see this nice view of the valley down below. Now the valley down below at the bottom there is called the Valley of 8, or the region of 8. There were 8 people that came off the ark, and so this area here has the name for the 8 that came off the ark, the Valley of 8 or region of 8.
And the stones, as you've shown me this before, I'm sure we're going to get to it, they're also indicated with markers of 8.
Yes, we'll see 8 crosses on these stones, where early Christians came through and put crosses on the stones. And a lot of times 8 were on the stones for the 8 people that came from the flood. They associated these stones as being with Noah's Ark and part of the flood story. So, quite interesting.
So Ron Wyatt's not the first to suspect such things, nor
No.
was the group in 1960.
Right, he's kind of late actually. Yeah. And again, here is a side of the ark. We can see the rib timbers, the vertical rib timbers on the side of the ark, which again showing a man-made design, man-made construction that would give it a lot of strength, these large vertical ribs. And then here's a close-up of them. Now you can see again it's in poor condition, but there's a rib on the left and a rib kind of in the center here and a rib on the right. But you see the vertical fissures or cracks going up and down, showing where there's separation between the ribs and so forth.
You can see how large they are compared to the hat there at the bottom of the picture.
Yes, right. And then again, here's another photo of the rib timbers. You see the vertical fissures.
Now the
And-
size of these rib timbers compared to, we look at, okay, well, we had what am I trying to say? I'm trying to say some very simple tools to build this thing. We would assume 6,000 years ago. Would that suggest that the people were a lot stronger somehow?
They were stronger, yes, but then they also had metal tools. Now, National Geographic had a program a while back on Noah's Ark, and they showed them trying to make some boards for Noah's Ark, and these men in their video had wooden tools trying to make wooden boards for Noah's Ark. That's kind of hard. But we're told in Genesis 4 that Tubal-Cain was an instructor of metal workers in brass and iron.
Yeah, 422, I think, is it? Yeah.
Yes. So before the flood, they were schooled or knew full well how to work metal, how to create metal. So we should expect they had metal tools. We should expect metal to be on Noah's Ark, and it was.
And the people were larger than us?
Yes. And we'll find out more about that.
All right.
Yeah. Now here's a port side. We can see the bow or front of the ark in the distance on the right side at the top of the photo. And then on the left, we see the port side where it's dropping down. It's in worse condition than the starboard side.
It is more exposed, though, than the starboard side,
Yes,
is it not?
it is, yes. Now, this is the metal rivet, as it's called, that was found in 1990 when Ron had a tour group out there, and this is what they found. You have a center rod with a washer around it.
Was that what that is?
Yes, and then the center rod, when it was hot, it would be struck, and it would clench or seize that round washer onto the rod. And this would be used where there are rib timbers coming together, where the timbers are joined together. They would then put the rods through there, and then these washers, or as Mr. Wyatt called these, rivets, giant rivets, holding it together. So
That's not unlike the, if you've ever been to Charleston, South Carolina, they have buildings with rods going right through them because of concerns of earthquake.
okay.
And they're still there to this day. They're put there many years ago. But it's the same thing. It's a rod going through the building, and there's plates on either side,
Okay.
and the rod goes through the
That's
plates.
just like Noah's Ark here, yes. So it's 3.5 inches in diameter, and Mr. Wyatt had this tested at Galbraith Labs. Now, when I was there in 2000, I found 2 of these on the side of the Ark. And I also had mine tested. My tests and Ron's tests both agreed.
Wow.
Now, I had 2 testings done, and Ron had 1, and all 3 of the tests showed that there was the same percentage of aluminum metal and same percentage of titanium metal. Now, this particular piece I gave back to the visitor center there in Turkey. This is the remains of a washer. It has a crescent shape to it, but it's part of a round washer. The right side of the artifact there is the part of the washer. Now here is the end of a metal rod that I saw on the side of the ark. At the round center object there in the center of the photo is the round end of a rod. And I had it tested, and this is the third test that's been done as far as I know. Again, it's the same percentages, the same aluminum metal, the same titanium metal, and we have it in the display case here that shows... I believe
you have a shot there of it on the screen of what we're seeing here on stage.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's got the aluminum metal and the titanium metal, 8% aluminum, 1.3% titanium metal. And this
now the rest of it, obviously, this doesn't add up to 100%. So what do they determine as the rest of it?
I don't know. I had to tell them what to test for.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And it was $60 for each metal that I mentioned. So I didn't want to give them 1,000 metals to search for. But so this is the end of a metal rod there. Noah's Ark, again, agreeing with what Ron found, agreeing with the other crescent shape that we found. And I found these on opposite sides of the ark, on the outside of the ark. So 2 different areas, plus wherever Ron found his. So 3 different areas, the same metal composition of the same man-made metal. So this is, a man-made object.
Now, presumably what is surrounding this is petrified wood, we'd have to assume at this point?
There would be, when some of it may be some mud that's mixed in, where the mud kind of covered the ark. But yes, there should be some sort of petrified wood associated with this. Okay, well, we're going to come back to this in a minute. We're going to show a nail from Noah's Ark next, but first, we're going to break for a minute here. If you are enjoying this as much as I am, support this program. We don't have any corporate sponsors. Our sponsors are you. You make the show happen, and welcome back. Thank you for supporting this program. You can do that anytime by going to aroodawakening.tv/give. Now, Kevin, in the middle of our presentation here, we broke, and now we're coming back. We are discussing metal, not only petrified wood, but metal found at the site of Noah's Ark, and that is because Tubal-Cain was a metal worker. We have evidence of that in Genesis 4. Now what are we seeing up on the screen here? So this is a cylindrical shape of a nail found in the remains there of Noah's Ark, and I sent it off to the lab, and it also came back with aluminum metal inside of it. So again, we have the metal rivets, the metal rod, you have the metal nail, all with aluminum inside. And so, again, this is interesting information. Now, on the starboard side, in this graphic here, you see a nice vertical rib timber on the port side. Again, this is, it has a rather curved shape to it, sort of like the ribs we were speaking of earlier. It's a really nice example of the ribs on the port side. But Ron Wyatt had a radar, subsurface interface radar device that he could run across the side of the ark, and he noticed that there was a chamber at this particular spot. And so he did a core drill. It's about 6 inches in diameter, but about 5 feet deep. But anyway, he drilled into that chamber and used a long rake device stuck in there, and he pulled out petrified antler, petrified animal dung, cat hair, I believe it was red human hair, and then also some type of fiber similar to fiber optic, where light would hit one end of it and it would go out the other end. Very strange. Very interesting, evidence that he pulled out of that chamber. So if an excavation can ever be done, there's going to be additional exciting information inside the ark, and a lot of petrified timbers inside the structure. So here's a view of the visitor center. When I was on the ark, you can see a tour group on the right who are looking down upon the ark. Here is a close-up of the ark using the telephoto. Different lighting, you can see different features of the ark. And again, you can see the rib timbers on this starboard side on the side of the ark. And here's another view from the stern. And now, Arthur Brandenburger, a photogrammetrist, he said, "I have no doubt at all that this object is a ship. In my entire career, I've never seen an object like this in a stereo photo. This is one of the people back in 1960 that went out to the Ark site, and he believed that this, really was the Ark site because of the incredible shape of it, and being a boat, and of course finding out later that its exact length is stated in the Bible. So Dr. Sally Bayrak-Tutin, he is a geologist there in Turkey, and he believes fully that it is the Noah's Ark site. He said it's a man-made structure, and for sure it's Noah's Ark. He's been on the History Channel talking about this Ark site. He also said, very similar to an ark in the dimensions, the length, the width, and the height are very, very close to the figures given in the books. Such as, I don't know if the Quran does mention something about Noah's Ark, but of course he's referring also to the Bible. Now, that subsurface interface radar I spoke about earlier, the manufacturer, Mr. Wyatt, showed them the printout where he ran it over the top of the Ark, and he got some readings of the rib timbers inside. And the manufacturer of it stated, this data does not represent natural geology. It's a man-made structure. The reflections are occurring way too periodic to be random natural type interfaces. So they are saying this is a man-made structure that he ran the radar device over top of.
Regardless of whether you believe it is Noah's Ark, it is a boat, it's man-made, it's something.
Yes. Now here's the rib timber in 1987 when they had the visitor center ceremony dedicating the site for Noah's Ark National Park. He had his radar device out, running it over top of the Ark, and he said, hey, there's something under the ground here, and the authorities said, dig it up. So he dug up this nice deck timber. It's in 3 different layers, and on the left edge of the photo here, at the end of it, is some glue oozing out. So there was glue applied between each layer, and they were combined together. Plywood is stronger than wood of just one single layer, and that's what we have here. The wood was applied in layers, and it was glued between each layer. And of course it was tested and found to have a high level of organic carbon in it, consistent with petrified wood. So again, we have wood in Noah's Ark. In the center of this photo, you see some protrusions sticking up in a row. There's 4 or 5 going horizontally across. These are vertical deck support timbers. Or wait a minute, in this case, these are horizontal timbers that would have come out across the deck. We're standing on the center of the deck. These are over on the side, and they would have extended toward us, toward the center of the deck of the Ark. So these are horizontal deck support posts. They're basically, broken off at this point, but you're seeing a random, or actually a systematic pattern here in a row. You've got 5 in a row here of the horizontal deck support timbers. Here is a model, computer model of what the Ark could have looked like based upon Ron's scans. There would have been a door here in the right front, the bottom of our picture here in the right front. And there's stairs going down, a ramp system in that area according to the scans. Here's the Ark compared to the Bounty. You can see how much larger.
It's a large ship.
Yes, very, very large. And Dr. Ekrem Akragul, he is a prominent archaeologist in Turkey some years back. At any rate, it is a ship, an ancient ship. It must be preserved, he said. So again, we have confirmation of the Ark site. Now here's my friend Jerry Bowen and his son Jeremy standing on the bow of the Ark with the lesser Ararat in the distance in the center of the photo, and the greater Ararat would be to our left in the clouds. But they're standing here on the bow of the Ark, the very front. And this is a picture from that spot looking downwards. You're looking down the length of the Ark with the rock intrusion on our left center there, and then the bow, you cannot see, or the stern, excuse me, the back of it in the distance there, you can't see too well in the shadows, but you're standing here on the front of the Ark looking downwards, the length of it. And here's a photo of myself standing on the Ark with the valley down below, the Valley of 8. Here's a drone shot of the ark formation. On the kind of the right side of our picture, we see the ark. And you can see how the sides have been skewed outwards because it's been torqued or turned on this rock intrusion on the right side of the ark.
Now that becomes obvious in that shot.
Yes,
now.
it's been twisted on that rock, and it caused the right side to splay outwards. Now this is another picture from our drone of the ark. You can see the symmetrical shape with the bow in the distance, and you see the nice curved center of the ark and the sides and so forth. But we're heading away from Noah's Ark, and we're heading toward a village where these sea anchors were hung on the front of the ark. Along the way, we see some of the little village structures, very primitive. And this is the village where the sea anchors are held. There, it's a village of Arzep, it's called. And here are some of the sea anchors. We can see some crosses carved on them.
And there are 8 crosses typically
on
these?
some of them, yes.
Okay.
Some have more, some have less, but some have the 8 for the 8 people that were on the ark.
Now, how many of these are out there? I mean,
there's like 13.
13. So
Yes.
there's something significant with these.
Right, right. And this was a rather large one lying down, and at the top of it that we'll see, at the top of the picture here on it, there's some ancient writing, which I believe they could not translate or decipher this, some type of ancient writing.
Now, how can we tell that these are anchor stones?
We'll see here shortly. Some have the holes drilled in them that you can see. Now this one here, it has a nice large one in the center for Noah. The left bottom here would represent Mrs. Noah. Then there's 3 smaller crosses representing the 3 sons. And then 3 very small crosses representing the wives of the sons. Now this is a very large anchor stone. An author said that there's 4 feet of this underground. So if you combine it with 7 feet above ground, then you're talking about 11 feet, the length of this anchor stone. You see the nice hole drilled in the top of it where a rope would be pulled, and that would be attached to the what I believe is the front of the ark.
As we have on the model here.
Yes,
now,
as we saw on the model.
where do we get this idea that they were on the front of the ark? Where does this come from?
If you look on Wikipedia, it's one source under sea anchor. You'll see that they are attached to the front of a boat, and it causes, when the waves come, it causes the rear to come in line perpendicular to the waves. It causes the rear to line up and causes this, the front, to be facing the oncoming waves. Even wind will do that. Wind will blow this around, and so the front's right into the wind, and it did that also with the waves. So this is a perfect design that God came up with. Now here's myself standing beside the large anchor stone. And here's a close-up. We can see Mount Ararat in the distance, and we can see that these holes are drilled out from opposite sides, and then the rope pulled through, a knot tied, and then the rope would be brought up to the front of the ark. Now over in the Mediterranean, of course, there are some sea anchors used there, but look how small they are. They're smaller because we were talking about smaller boats. So this is at Caesarea there along the Mediterranean, and you can see several different types of the sea anchors along the Mediterranean. Here's an anchor stone here with no carvings on it, but it's lying flat, and you can see the hole that's been drilled through it where a rope would have been pulled through. But in this one you can see an ornate anchor stone. Now these have been found to the east and to the west of Arzep on opposite outlying areas. This is a Byzantine style cross anchor stone, which would date back to the 3rd century. Very ornate, very ancient style.
So they have
crosses.
these stones all over the place, and are we assuming that all of them belong to one ship, the Noah's Ark?
I would assume so, since the size of them.
Yeah.
You know, and there's no, the bodies of water nearest this are 75 miles away, you know, 2 different directions. So there's no local large body of water.
There's another clue that this must be it.
Yes, yes. So the ark was floating through this area, if you can imagine, you know, 4,000 feet of water above this, and they decided to cut these anchor stones off. They fell down to the bottom to this area here, and then the ark floated over to the current mountain where it is today.
Right.
And kind of came to rest in that spot.
And the current would push these stones around, I'm assuming, and before they landed.
Yes. This is one on the opposite side. We saw one that would have been toward the east. Now this is the western extreme edge. It's on top of a hill. We could see Arzep in the distance, and Noah's Ark would be further that direction, another 10 miles down the mountain range is where the Ark is. Now this is one out in the outlying area where it was not near the village, but you can see a really nicely drilled hole in this one. There's no crosses on it. It may have been buried for a long time, and it kind of came to view later. But
one has to wonder how they drilled those holes.
Yeah, well, of course they had metal tools.
So maybe not that impossible. Yeah.
They were able to, drill them out using their metal tools, built before the flood, the tools. So again, that's evidence of them having tools. A wooden tool would not drill that out.
No, impossible.
Like National Geographic tried to say. So here's a nicely drilled hole. You can see how symmetrical it is. Very nicely drilled out. When we were in the village there, we went to one of the homes, and in his courtyard he had collected some nice carvings. Now this looks very ancient. It's some type of ram, it appears, with the head on the right side here. No telling how old this is. This could be 2,000 or 3,000 years old.
Yeah, there's the horns etched on the side of the head.
Right. Very unique. It looks like it's got a lot of weathering to it. Here's another interesting carving. There's a man on the right side here. It looks like he's lifting up some sort of battle axe or something. His left arm is stretched forward. There's a lot of history going back. This is where civilization began, at this exact spot.
Yes, it is. Essentially, it is.
Yeah. This was another place where the taxi stopped running that day when Ron went out here in '77. We saw the anchor stones where the taxi stopped, or the sea anchors, and now we have the remains of a building. The walls were higher when Ron first saw this in 1977, and he said that the windows were angled back. The sides of the windows were angled back so that light could come in better. And if you notice some castles or fortresses in ancient times, they would have angled side windows also, so they could shoot arrows out at a better angle out of the window.
Yes.
This way or this way. And so when I was there one time, I thought, I wonder if I could find some stones that were angled like Ron Wyatt mentioned. And so I found several of these 45-degree cut stones that would have been part of the windows, sides of the windows.
Interesting.
Going up the side of the window there.
Oh, yeah.
On either side, there'd be 45-degree cut stones, and that's what that is. Normally in a house, you don't have 45-degree cut stones. You've got square stones and so forth. So these would have been going up the side of the window frame to the right, to the left.
So it validates the story right there.
So again, this is validation of what he was saying, that the window openings were very unique, something you don't normally see. So Ron found a tombstone in front of this building, and it had a rainbow carved on it. And beneath that was a boat shape on a wave. And out from the boat were these 8 people walking. And the second most important person was a woman, because of her long hair. She had her head down and her eyes closed. And he took it to be that was Mrs. Noah's tombstone.
Okay.
And he showed this to someone later, and they came back and they paid a local $300 or $400 to dig up her sarcophagus.
So they knew something was underneath here.
Yes. And the sarcophagus that Ron heard was 18 feet long. So that would make her, approximately 16, 15 feet in height. Now, we know before the flood, that they lived longer, and from what they've understood is that the oxygen level was higher before the flood. Perhaps there was a water canopy around the earth that protected them from UV rays.
It's what they call the hyperbolic theory?
Type of, yeah,
Okay.
that would give you, better strength, better growth, and so forth. And so these people, they lived longer, they lived larger, but because of sin, sadly, we've gone down in size. We live in an atmosphere post-flood that doesn't enable us to live longer. But before the flood, they were much taller, much larger. And Ron said that on Mrs. Noah was a golden bodice with jewels and so forth.
Oh, so there was a skeleton there.
Yes, there was a skeleton, and she had a necklace, and that he said that these were sold on the black market for $100 million. So,
not surprising, since that little pomegranate we saw in the last episode was sold
$500,000.
$500,000.
Yeah. So anyway, this is the site of apparently where Mrs. Noah was buried, and there's some type of building there. And here we're kind of walking around the remains. And the locals heard that some gold had been found up here, so they came up to this building and systematically destroyed it, looking for gold. So the building is no more, just the stones there. But here we see a stone with a couple crosses on it, perhaps Armenian Christians lived here up until around 1915 or so before they were killed off.
What became of that sarcophagus?
It was hauled away. We don't know where it is. Yeah, all evidence was hauled away, sadly. So out from the house, up just above the house, we see the remains of fences, stone fencing. We're told that he practiced husbandry. Animal husbandry is one of the ways to practice husbandry. And so he had these fences, Noah did, in the area of this house or area of the structure where he was keeping animals. And we can see the fences in the background, once again, in the countryside. Now we're going further up the hillside. We're looking down toward the remains of that structure or house. And we can see Arzep in the left side of the photo, in the distance where the anchor stones or sea anchors are found. And we're going further up the hillside. We see the fencing going horizontally across the screen here as we're going up the hillside. But in the center of the photo, you see a large stone kind of standing by itself in the grass there. That's where we're headed. Here I'm standing next to it. This was an altar, Ron believed, that Noah used. Of course, if he was 16 feet tall, this would be perhaps chest high or, just above the waist slightly perhaps. This would be perfect for him to use. And if he offered a sacrifice here or they had a worship service here of some type, people could gather below and they could hear his voice really well, type of natural amphitheater. We can see the village of Arzep in the distance where the sea anchors are located. Here, standing atop the large stone, looking down in the valley below. And again, we can see the fencing going out where Noah practiced husbandry. And then here's a photo of a corral where the animals were held in here that were going to be sacrificed. We believe that this is the area where the ark was found, and the remains of Noah, the remains of the sea anchors and so forth, and very exciting information.
Well, thank you for sharing that. This is unprecedented information on Shabbat Night Live, so thank you very much, Kevin.
Thank you. Appreciate
I'm sure we have just scratch the surface here according to what I see on ArkDiscovery.com.
That's right.
So if you want to know more about Kévin Fisher and the Ark of the Covenant and Noah's Ark and Sodom and Gomorrah and all these wonderful things we've talked about on this series, go to ArkDiscovery.com. Check it out. There's lots of information there. And if you'd like to see more of what Michael Root has to say about these things, go to aroodawakening.tv. Michael also has teachings on Sodom and Gomorrah and Red Sea crossing, and you'll see that a lot of these things all back up to Ron Wyatt. He had an amazing life and had amazing discoveries. So go and check out from both angles what Ron discovered. Thank you again, Kevin.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Come and see us again.
Thank you.
All right, until next time, shalom on Shabbat Night Live.